Have you ever wondered why people treat us the way that they do, or why some of our friends or the people around us may treat each other a little differently? Well, this is because of boundaries, and boundaries are what teaches others how to treat us. In today's video, I want to go over the different types of boundaries that we have, their benefits, and I also want to start the conversation with you to see if you already have good boundaries or if you may need a little bit of help. Now, as always, before we get into it, my name is Leo Esquivel, and I'm a professional counselor that is trying to keep mental health nice and simple so that you can think clearly, stay sharp, and live life on your own terms. So there's a few different types of boundaries. One of them can be emotional, another one can be physical. We also have mental, spiritual, and even time boundaries. I'd like to share a brief story about some physical boundaries that I had to establish as a kid growing up. Now, as a kid, I grew up in California. Shout out to the 559. I remember that there was a lot of kids living in the apartment complex that I grew up in. I also had an older brother, so we would always go outside, hang out with the different kids, make a lot of friends. But I remember this one particular kid that was a little bit of a outcast. He didn't really hang out with anybody. I knew him because he was in my grade. I never had him in my class, but I would always see him around school. I remember this one time I started talking to him at school, and little by little, he would come out and play with the rest of the kids in the neighborhood, and specifically with me, right? Because I was one of the few kids that would talk to him. However, over time, I noticed that he started to be a little rough. He would kind of shove me a little bit when we would play basketball, or we'd be playing tag, and instead of just giving a light tap on the shoulder or something, he would just punch me. And I'm like, yo, this kid's getting a little rough. Like, what's up with him, right? And it wasn't long before I just dreaded being around this kid. I didn't want him to come out and hang out with us. I mean, he was just turning into my bully, right? Now, what's funny is that I was a little bit bigger than him, but my dad very strict with me and my brother growing up, and he never wanted us to get into trouble, especially fight with other kids in the neighborhood. However, one day after school, me and a good buddy of mine were gonna meet at the playground and ride our scooters. Now, to get to the playground, there was this street. I was on one side of the street, and my bully was on the other side. And I could just visually see him from the corner of my eyes crossing the street deliberately to come run into me. What's also funny is that my brother happened to pull up as well. I remember looking over at my brother and telling him, hey, listen, bro, I'm about to get into a fight. My brother was super confused. He's like, what? What are you talking about? I'm going to get into a fight. I'm just giving you a heads up. Sure enough, as soon as he passes by, he says, what's up? And then he pushes me. He pushes me so hard that I almost tripped over my scooter. At that point, I decided that I had enough of this. So I threw my scooter on the floor. I went up to him. I pushed him, I punched him, I kicked him. I mean, I went full UFC on him, and I could just see the scared look on his face as he looked at me and he said, yo, relax, I just pushed you. Which I responded by saying, well, don't push me again then. I remember being so furious, but I learned two things. One, that violence is definitely not the way to establish boundaries. Two, that establishing boundaries is very important. It wasn't long before this kid stopped bothering me, never once again laid a hand on me. And to be honest with you, in some way, he kind of respected me for standing up for myself. Now, I'll go ahead and end the story here, but just so you know, this kid ended up having a lot of issues at home that he was kind of taking out on me for some reason. And perhaps in another video, I'll talk about why bullies become bullies, right? But for today, I want to keep it to boundaries. And I want to talk about how having good boundaries will help us protect our peace, avoid burnout, and just overall help us build stronger relationships. You see, having good boundaries reinforces our self-worth, our self-beliefs, and ultimately gives us a sense of control over our lives, whether that be with our energy, time, or our attention. And speaking of attention, this is why I'm so grateful for you tuning in, because I know that you could be anywhere else in the world, but here you are listening to this video. So let's get into it. Here are some of the signs that you may have good boundaries. You say no without feeling guilty. You ask clearly for what you want. You feel safe and confident being yourself, and you respect other people's boundaries. Now, in case you're listening to that and you're wondering, man, I don't have any of those. Well, here are the first steps that you can take to establish some good boundaries. First and foremost, try to notice where you feel uncomfortable or where you may be feeling drained. For example, in the case with my bully, I was feeling drained physically. Every time I would see him, I knew he was either going to punch me, push me, kick me, or all of the above. And that was just so draining for me, and I knew I had to make a stand. Now, let me be clear. Physical violence is definitely not something I want to promote on this channel, but As a kid, I didn't know any better. I didn't know how to establish boundaries. I didn't know how to stand up for myself. I was kind of just learning this on the fly. So before you go through extreme measures like I did, I want to help you define what your limits may be. What are you okay with and what are you not okay with? I know that some of you that may be watching this video are actually tuning in because you don't have very good boundaries with others. So the first thing that you can do is you can just start small. Choose one area that you may be struggling with, whether that be emotional, mental, physical, etc., and take it one step at a time. Another thing that you can do is use I statements. For example, I'm sorry, I can't stay up tonight. I need rest. Once you effectively communicate what your needs are, then just stay firm. Hold your ground and don't back away. I remember a while back, some of my friends wanted me to stay up late, and I knew I had to wake up early for a meeting. So I had to stand my ground. I had to stay firm and I had to let them know, look, guys, I would love to keep playing, but I'm going to bed. I have to call it quits. For some of us, putting our foot down may seem a little unnatural, especially if we're not used to doing it. But if you can try doing this in a respectful and firm manner, promise you that things normally do get better. You start feeling a little bit less guilty over time because you realize that you are trying to meet your needs. And in the long run, you're actually trying to be a better version of yourself for the people around you. Part of holding your ground is not having to justify your decisions. Once again, if you know what your needs are, you just have to voice them. The people that can't understand your needs probably don't have good boundaries themselves. And we have to be mindful that sometimes these people can drain us. Nobody else is responsible for establishing our boundaries but ourselves. So once again, stand firm and you don't have to justify your decisions. Now, if you try some of these things and you feel like they're still not working for you, then a good option at this point could be to seek support from a therapist, a mentor, or, a good friend. One of the things that I do with my clients is I help keep them accountable for the goals that they've already set. If I have a client that is experiencing a lot of people walking all over them, nobody respects their boundaries, we come up with some goals and I reinforce some of the things that they are trying to accomplish and encourage them along the way. One of the things that can happen with people that are establishing boundaries for the first time is that they can experience fear or guilt for holding their ground. They may feel like if they're a little too rough, the people in their circles are not going to want to be around them anymore. However, establishing good boundaries normally has the opposite effect. This will strengthen the relationship, protect your peace, and help you keep your cup full so that you can pour into others. Remember that we all have our needs and having good boundaries helps us meet those needs. Now, before this video ends, I want to offer some encouragement because not everybody is properly taught how to establish boundaries. Like in my case with my bully, I did not know that I needed to be a little bit more firm on how I wanted to be treated. I just figured that, okay, if I'm a nice kid, if I'm friendly, then everybody would just treat me with respect. Sometimes that may not be the case. We have to understand ourselves a little bit better, figure out what our needs are, and then we can slowly start to create those perimeters around us that teach other people where they can step and where they can't. Once again, I know that establishing boundaries for the first time can be a little scary. However, if you have been struggling with your relationships or if you feel like you've been drained by the people around you, then it's probably a good time to slowly start to figure out what your boundaries may be. And if you use some of these tips, I'm certain that they will help you get started in the right direction. As always, I hope that this video offered some value. I really enjoy trying to help in any way that I can. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below and I'll be more than happy to get back to you or maybe even create a video on any questions you may have. Thank you for tuning in. Till next time, Leo, checking out.